Next topic, Patrick, and it actually is connected to what we were just talking about because you brought up a good point is will this demand, given occupancy, office occupancy still at half of what it was pre-pandemic, will the demand for condos continue? That's what I just heard your question, and it's a very good question. And I think if I had to answer it today, right here, May 3rd, 2023, if I had to answer it, I would say yes, Patrick. And the reason for that is because of the next sticky note, which is record breaking immigration. And because single family is so difficult to afford from our perspective, especially here in Ontario, what's happening is people have to go to condos because they can't afford anything else. So as a result, people will continue to flock to condos only because of their price point, not necessarily because their job is close to where they want to buy, where they close to where they live, but only because they want to buy. They know they need to buy, but there's nowhere else to buy that's affordable. That's why I think that you're not going to see a massive drop in the condo market. It's one possible reason.
Well, I think, yeah, and we have to go beyond buy. I mean, the other side of that coin is in the terms of the rental market. We're knowing that the rental market or the rental demand continues to grow. We've been talking about that for 3 years as well. You cannot have this kind of immigration coming in to the country and then into the provinces like an Ontario or Vancouver / BC, Toronto, where you have a lot of people coming in and they need a place to live. And so there's enough, I guess, demand to accommodate the supply, at least on the rental side of it, even if the affordability doesn't shift.
Now, speaking of record-breaking immigration, Patrick, right now, last year was a record-breaking year for immigration coming into the country. For those watching who are kind of like,
why are we talking about immigration? Isn't this a real estate show? Don't you guys, aren't you talking about real estate?
Well, immigration feeds real estate really well because the immigrants coming into the country are your clients. They are your renters, and that really drives population, and population is part of the economic fundamentals we look at the Real Estate Investment Network. So just want to connect those dots for people. But last year, in the first quarter of 2022, we had 113,800 people come into the country for the first quarter of 2022. For the first 2 months, Patrick, meaning not the first quarter, just the first 2 months, January, February, we're over 100,000 already. If we keep this pace, we're going to be well over 600,000 people coming into the country. Record breaking is the way to describe this.
Yeah, and they're talking, when you look at permanent residents plus international students plus temporary workers, you're talking about over 1 million people. And, there's lots of discussion about just how responsible the federal government is being in allowing people into this country. As you listen to others or you listen to people who are in the political sphere, and it really is a disconnect. And the disconnect is that right now, the focus is bringing people into the country, and the federal government is got a huge disconnect from the provinces and the municipalities in terms of where are you going to put all these people. And of course, it's finally starting to show up. I think there's enough, conversation being had with the opposition parties to shine a light on it more and more, because it's not just housing. I mean, it's not just housing that is creating a problem. It's creating a problem in terms of just overall infrastructure, and healthcare being one of the prime things that it's causing a problem with. And, I happened to be, this was 3 or 4 months ago, I went for some blood tests, and I went to a local clinic for them to draw blood, kind of an annual checkup. And as I'm sitting there, I had an appointment, but as I'm sitting there, I'm watching people come through into the line. Do you have an appointment? No. Do you have an appointment? No. But obviously, immigrants into the country, like some of them had trouble speaking the language, they were coming in to get checked up. I mean, you could see just the stress within that one clinic and the pressure of people coming in. And it was just an interesting observation, total anecdotal, but having been in that clinic every year over, many years of my annual checkups, I see the difference.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating kind of time from that perspective. What I will say is, as rental housing providers, this is what is really shoring up rents. This is really what's driving a lot of demand in our space. I mean, we see it every single day. And Patrick, it's also changing the market. You and I have been talking about this for years. But what it does is it actually changes the market around in terms of who's looking for an apartment, who's looking to buy. Those people can't buy, so you end up with a better quality renter, and that kind of pushes the entire market downstream, and that creates affordability issues even more. We'll talk about affordability issues next, because we've uncovered where this affordability problem really starts. We've uncovered where it starts. So we're going to tell you where it starts, this affordability, where it starts and ends, this affordability issue, our amazing government and all their stuff. The point, though, Patrick, is that, just like, and I was telling you this off air earlier, but just like in the last 3 years, throughout COVID, when the market was ripping, I mean, we were seeing 20, 30, 40, 50% jumps in values. And I was saying on camera, go back on YouTube and watch it. I was saying, I don't like this. I want a nice, steady growth in the real estate market. I want 3%. I want 5%. I want 7%. I do not want 30, 40%. Because even though it looks good on paper, you pay for it the year after or 2 years later. At some point, it comes back down. And we've been experiencing that for the last roughly 12 months. Well, I'm a little afraid, Patrick, that this is going to happen from a rental perspective as well, because some of these rents have gone up so much that if the tide turns, and as we get to the other side of the slope, because there's always an up and there's always a down, you're going to have rents come down. And some investors who are not as wise, not as savvy, are going to make bad decisions. They're going to have bad timing. And as a result, they're going to pay the price on the back end of this slope. That's what I'm afraid of a little bit. And, I don't voice concerns very often, but this is something I'm watching closely.
Well, listen, our job is to connect dots. So let's just think this through. So when you look at the immigration, we know we have record-breaking immigration coming in. We don't see that stopping soon. At the end of the day, Canada needs it. Now, here's the thing, is immigration, I'm 100% behind immigration, but we've lost control of it. Now, that's a government thing, and we can debate that all day long. But at the end of this conversation, we come to realize that, number one, immigration is strong. Demand for rental housing remains strong. We do not have the supply to accommodate, nor will we gain the supply to accommodate. Now, that could change and shift slightly depending on what city you might be in. We look at what's happening provincially and or by city, and we can say, okay, well, they might have an oversupply of something as immigration comes into that province or into that city. But ultimately, here's one of the things that we do know, and that is that immigrants coming into a country take at least 2 years before they are in the financial position, have a credit rating, have a job, even know where they want to live before they start to even consider buying a home. So there is a lag. So to what you're saying, as much as we have some concerns around it, a lot of things have to change. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that it isn't a legitimate concern, but how would immigration have to go? It would have to be almost turned off. Secondly, supply would have to be.
That could happen. If you look at the numbers in the States, look what's happening in the States. In the States, they have all but turned off their immigration. I don't have the exact numbers offhand, but if you look at their charts, their immigration is way down, way down. And by the way, that's why some of their unemployment rate is at I think their unemployment rate is like just above 3%. I mean, it's crazy. Big part of that is because they don't have the immigrants coming in the country.
Got it. We don't have that issue. So again, if we're connecting the dots, we, even as it is today, forget the immigration. I mean, that just exacerbates the problem. Forget the immigration. We don't have enough housing supply to supply if everybody just could have something today. So the point is that you have a good, valid point. It's why we look at the economic fundamentals to see the future. Now, if all of a sudden somebody said, we're turning off the tap, we're getting out of this immigration game, and we're going to scale it down to 200,000 or 300,000 people a year. Okay, well, that seems reasonable. Even if they scaled it back to 200,000 or 300,000, it's not going to have a meaningful impact right away on what we need for supply. So this is a thing that, yes, you make a good point, and I'm not negating it, other than we have time to see these numbers unfold, and we see into the future. So again, to your point, as rental housing providers, that's why we do the research, because we're always looking to connect the dots.
That's the key point right there, Patrick, is that, and that's why we track these numbers, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching this, if you're part of the Real Estate Investment Network, we report on these numbers every single month. So we see these trends developing. And Patrick, this is something we're tracking very closely. And don't get me wrong, right now it's a boom for people that are in the rental housing business. It's a boom. There's a lot of renters. You don't have to fight for clients. You don't have to, it's fantastic. It may not always be this way, but you can see it coming if you're a sophisticated real estate investor, and it's something you should be watching for. So just keep that in mind. I do want to address a couple stats, but before I do, it sounds like you have something else to say, Patrick.
I just want to add one more thing, which is a huge influencer, and that is from a rental housing provider point of view. For those of you who get the education and take the time to put in the time, understand one thing. So immigration aside, JG, what's happening is OSFI is now maybe saber rattling, but they're already talking about, something in order, politics over policy always. And so they're talking about changing the rules, again, the lending rules, mortgage financing rules for investors. What's that going to do? Well, this is the government shooting themselves in the foot again, which is to say, we need rental housing. Well, let's just take 50% of the rental housing providers, which are the mom and pops that are buying duplexes, triplexes, quads, that kind of stuff. And we're going to make it harder for them. As a matter of fact, we think that we shouldn't even have that. They shouldn't even be buying that much real estate. And you go, you guys, are you like losing your minds? So that's the challenge. So again, when we look at a rental supply, being a rental housing provider, we keep saying it to people, stay in the game, keep moving forward one step at a time. No, it's not easy. Keep grinding away. There's a huge win in it, given where we are going economically, not just nationally, but globally.
Couple of stats I want to share, Patrick, that the research team pulled up, which I thought was fascinating, and it's good for people that understand how important population trends are in real estate. We didn't know this, Patrick, but Quebec, actually, the Quebec government caps the incoming inflow of immigrants to 50,000 newcomers a year, period. So even if Canada brought in 1 million new immigrants, Quebec would only get 50,000. That's the most they take in, which is interesting. We can debate whether that's good, that's bad. The point is there is a cap. They cap how many people come into their province. Fascinating. Now, Ontario takes in the biggest number of these immigrants by far, then BC, then Alberta. What's interesting is Quebec says, I don't want more than 50, whereas the Maritimes are saying, bring me as many as I can get because I need more people, because they understand the Maritimes have an aging population. Many of the provinces do, but at least the Maritimes understand they have this problem and they want the immigration. And to me, Patrick, anyone who's got those progressive policies, I like this as a real estate investor.
Well, we talked about this several shows ago. So many, I think it was a few months ago, we talked about the programs that they have in place to attract immigrants into the East Coast, because they do, in fact, need people, because they have an aging population, full stop. And that's what they have to address. Well, that's what we have to address as a country. And when we look at the quality of immigrants becomes, and I want to say quality, skill set of immigrants coming into the country continues to be problematic. Who are they bringing in? We need trades. We need doctors that are actually doctors, but they've got them driving Ubers. Like, it's so crazy, the whole immigration system, that it's breaking down. They can't handle it. And so this all plays into one of the next conversations that we're going to have, is around housing and solving the housing problem and why it continues to be a problem. So there.
Record-breaking immigration covered.
If you like what you learned here, go to the description below and subscribe for our free Insiders newsletter, where you can also stay up to date for our upcoming events and our courses.
If you want to see more stuff like this, click here. If you want to see the entire show, click there.